Welcome everybody. Thanks for watching. We're going to be interviewing Sheriff Doug Schuster today to get you some more information ahead of the election here coming up. Before we get started, I want to just mention some key dates. Right now in Bullhead City and in Lake Havasu, the libraries are both open for early voting. And in Kingman, it's the Catherine Heidenreich Adult Center. All three of those are open for early voting right now. Mail-in ballots, you can still request one-time mail-in ballots in all three cities up until this Friday, the 24th. Bullhead has asked that you send it back by the 27th to make sure that it gets in time. Kingman has said July 29th to make sure you get it in time. I suggest you just get it in on time. And then of course election day is August 4th, so make sure you get out there and vote. One of the things that we were told last night is make sure some of the ballots all have city council people on the back, so make sure that you flip it over to the back as well to get all of your voting in. So I'd like to introduce our Sheriff Doug Schuster. How you doing, Sheriff?
It can be a mouthful. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Hey, look, my last name is Pinecker, so
You've heard a lot of different versions.
Yes, some of them are not so flattering.
Thanks for having me, John.
Thanks for being here. Well, what I'd like to start out with, and I know you've been asked this a million times, but please give us your background, your philosophy on law enforcement, and anything else that you want to talk about in your career.
Fantastic. Well, again, my name is Doug Schuster. I'm your elected sheriff. I've lived here in Mohave County for 41 years. I've spent 30 years in law enforcement with the sheriff's office, the last 3.5 as the elected sheriff. Very proud to be your sheriff. We've done some pretty incredible things. As far as my personal life, I am married, coming up on my 30th anniversary in a couple months here. I will not forget that date. I have 3 wonderful children. My oldest, Caitlin, and her husband are expecting our first grandchild in September, so very excited about that. And as far as my law enforcement philosophy, law enforcement is ever changing. And when I started years ago, the way we conducted business is not the same as we conduct it today. And I like the direction that we are going here in Mohave County, despite what's happening around the country, because we're very involved with the community. We believe that we are at our strongest when we have community support, and it's very refreshing to know that the citizens of Mohave County, for the most part, really do support their law enforcement officers out there on the street. So I talk about hobbies, what I used to do before I was sheriff, but as sheriff I've had very little free time. So when I do find some time off, I love to fish. I'm an avid reader, and mostly just kind of hang out with the family. So that's the meat and potatoes of Doug Schuster.
Excellent, very good. Staffing, I know this is something we've talked about in the past. You had campaigned on increasing morale through increasing staff and addressing compression issues. In your first term, with the help of the Mohave County supervisors, you hired, at that time, 6 new deputies, but I think you can address that, it's changed, and address the compression issues. We also understand you have more officers in the academy right now, but are we up to ideal staffing levels? Do you think that there's still more that we need to do? Are we good? What are your thoughts on staffing?
Staffing is vital. No, we are not up to ideal staffing levels. One of the key components when I ran was to address the immediate concern of staffing, because that leads directly to poor morale and turnover. When I took office, we had 18 vacancies in our patrol division. That is significant for an agency our size. It's about 35% of our force. And the reason for those vacancies, the pay was well under standards for the local areas, and what we call compression, meaning we've had 10-year deputies making the same wage as a 1-year deputy. So it's very demoralizing, makes them want to move on to greener pastures. And in reality, John, throughout my 30 years with Mohave County, we have seen the county become kind of a training ground for our other local agencies. We hire them, we train them. It comes at huge expense to our county residents, only to see them leave in a year or 2 years, and you really can't blame them. People want to make a living. To give you an example, when I first took office, I had a deputy come to me. I'd known this man for years, and he said, "Sheriff, I'm very loyal. I love working here. I want to be with the county, but I'm making 12 cents more than the kid I'm training. I can't do this anymore." So that was a main priority into something we literally started from day one. When I got in office, that was the goal, and it was working diligently with the Board of Supervisors to get them, A, to understand the problem, and B, justify the problem. So we put together a strategic plan where we took statistical data from national, state, and local levels to see where we really stood. And we found that we were woefully low, and I already knew the answer, but we wanted to be able to show them why we were low. So far below state, local, and national averages that we were down about 50 deputies. So knowing that I couldn't ask the board to give me 50 deputies overnight, that's a huge expense, we asked them to consider giving us additional staffing each year as the county prospers. Every year when the county comes to budget hearings, we find out if we did good, we did bad. Well, if the county's doing well, I don't need to chase tax dollars to get the staffing I need. So the first year in office, very successful. We got money for compression that allowed us to retain the deputies we had. Second year, we were given 6 deputy positions. This coming year, in this year's budget, we with everything going on with COVID, I was told don't ask for much. But however, I did find a little bit of wiggle room and some salary savings, and I plan on adding 3 more deputies this year. I have to have the deputies on the street to fulfill the mission that we're after, and that's to combat crime. That's really what we're doing, and we're doing great with that.
So do you believe that the money that you are getting is keeping your head above water, both with compression and the amount of deputies that you have on the streets?
We're great when it comes to compression right now. We've fixed that problem. The deputy I talked about with 10 years on, he got a significant raise. He's where he should have been all along. And the irony is he came to me, he said, Sheriff, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I said, you don't have to thank me. All I did was get you where you should have been. We have to have continued compression increases in order to maintain effective staffing. It's vital to have experienced officers, and we were not at that point. I gauge everything. I try and figure out if we're successful by gauging it in certain arenas. Remember I talked about being a training ground for other agencies? Mm-hmm. Well, in my 30 years, I've never seen somebody wearing a blue uniform put on a gray uniform. Over the last year, we've taken 13. Now, I don't apologize to the chiefs of police. I tell them I'm not recruiting, but I'm not going to turn them away either. That brings in immediate value because these are senior veteran officers. I had most recently a sergeant come to me from another agency, and I pulled him in. I said, I can't pay you what you're making. Why do you want to be here? And he says, I believe the program that you created is the right direction, and I want to retire from Mohave County. That is a great gauge for me. It shows me that it's working.
Sorry, so those the 3 deputies that you're hoping that you get this coming year,
right?
Are you looking at training them new, or are you looking at, or will you just take?
Well, ideally, I'm a big fan of laterals, quite honestly. But there has to be some checks and balances. We have a lot of young people in our jail that are looking to get into law enforcement. That's how I started. So we're going to continue to put people through the academy. But I have to say, I do like that instant policeman where you bring them in. And as of today, we have no openings. That's another huge gauge. I have a waiting list of 25 to get on with our agency. So it's very inspiring to me to know that we are heading in the right direction. And we're just going to continue each year to ask for that until we hit our benchmark.
Very good. In April, you made the statement that you will not enforce the governor's stay-at-home executive orders. Your oath states, in part, that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona. The governor's ability to use executive orders falls within the state's constitution. So can you tell us why a governor's executive order doesn't fall under the Constitution of the state of Arizona?
Absolutely. Well, it does fall under the Constitution of the state of Arizona. The question is, what authority does he have to be broad-based in his executive orders? When he put out the first executive order pertaining to certain businesses and not other businesses, that was, to me, in clear violation of our Constitution. You can't, for a law to be effective, for a law to be constitutionally sound, it must be applicable to everyone. Okay, so if I tell you, John, hey, you can continue to work because I think your business is okay, but I tell Joe over here, hey, shut down, I don't care if your family's starving, we'll let you know when you can open up. I'm not going to turn criminals, I'm not going to turn law-abiding citizens, good, hard-working men and women, into criminals for doing nothing wrong but trying to feed their families. And I go one step further. I'm fortunate. I work for a government agency. I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. If that were not the case, and I was told I had to stop working and making money, I guess you're going to have to put me in jail because I've got to take care of my family. And it really had nothing to do with COVID. We've been pushing safety, knowledge, information from day one, but there is an amount of personal responsibility that we must get to. A great example is today. I came to your building. You required me to put a mask on. Well, of course, I'm going to follow that requirement, and if I didn't want to do that, you don't have to let me in. That's where we're kind of at with that order. And I think to sum it up the best, if the governor tomorrow decided that guns are just too harmful, they're just too dangerous, and by golly, Sheriff, I want you to go around and take all the guns from your constituents, what would my constituents expect me to do? You know, I don't get to hand pick, and that's what was said. You don't get to pick the laws. I'm not picking the laws. If it applies to everyone, I enforce it, whether I agree with it or not. But if it doesn't apply to everybody, now you have some significant constitutional issues, and that's agreed upon by the Attorney General. This is not over. The governor's executive powers are being questioned. They're being questioned in court because we need to know how broad is this? What can he do tomorrow? And it's nothing against him. The man's doing what he thinks is right. But I have to be that buffer between government overreach and the public. And so that's why we took that stand.
Very good. I think that explains it very well. Here's another confrontational one for you.
Oh, the fun of being sheriff.
You said, don't you like it when I start off with, you said
this.
You said in late May after the George Floyd death that you would stand with the protesters as long as they remained peaceful in their protest. Can you expand on why you would stand with people who are actually protesting the actions of someone in your same profession? And you've been endorsed by several police organizations.
Correct.
Has that caused a problem with them?
Okay. Going back to the George Floyd incident, I think every good cop in America was disturbed by that. I myself was disgusted by how that played out. That is not how we do law enforcement. There are always bad apples in every profession. In law enforcement, we're a little bit better than most because we're stringent about our application process. There's backgrounds, there's a lot of checks and balances in place, but people do get through. So my position watching the video, number one, was appalling. When I said that I would stand, and let's not take it out of context because there was more than just that word, but what I am saying is everyone has the right to free speech. Okay, I'm a constitutional sheriff. I stand behind the First Amendment. And as long as they're doing peacefully, doesn't mean I have to agree with their message. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that I agree with their message. I'm saying that if you want to protest peacefully, I will stand and allow you to do so. It's not my place to shut down a protest, and I think all law enforcement feels that way. The reason law enforcement are present at these protests is to ensure that order and peace is kept. We've seen what's happened around the country, and once it gets out of control, it's like a wildfire. Once it starts, now it's problematic to put that fire out. So we're there to ensure that they remain peaceful, and if they cross that line, it's going to be a bad day for them.
Okay.
So that my personal opinions of whatever movement, they really don't matter. You know, I have my own views. When it comes to law enforcement, if you want to protest tomorrow that only three-legged dogs should be allowed in Walmart, you know, I might not agree with you, but that's your right to do so. So that's where that position came from. And as far as law enforcement, no, they back me 150%. They are appreciative of the changes we've made. I've been endorsed by the Lake Havasu Police Association, the Bullhead Fraternal Order of Police, the Kingman Police Association, and most impressively for me, which makes me feel great, my own Deputy Sheriff's Association is saying, we don't want a new sheriff. He's doing everything he said he would do and then some. We're finally going in the right direction. Please, people, listen to us and say we like our boss. So that makes me feel good. That's my gauge.
Excellent. Kind of a follow-up there. Do you think that anything positive can come out of the protests and the equality movement around the country?
It's hard to say. I mean, this world is changing, and with the political views of certain people, I think in theory, yes. I think a peaceful protest, if people learn to listen and be more accepting, it can have value. But it seems like when we think of the word protest now, what do we think of? You know, a protest, there's going to be riots, there's going to be problems, there's going to be people hurt, possibly killed. That's not the intent of a protest. The protest is to get your message out. Doesn't mean I got to accept it or agree with it, but I'm going to allow you to do that. So I think if more protests around the country were accepted in that vein, there could be some impact for it. But unfortunately, the way things are going, I just don't see it.
A little bit more division than
it's too much
we
division.
had before. What one thing are you most proud of that you've accomplished during your career as a sheriff so far, and what one thing have you tried to accomplish that you've not yet had any luck?
I think my number one accomplishment is getting to know you. That really sums it up.
Yeah,
getting to know
I
John.
100% agree.
No, I think when I say accomplishment, I really believe that fulfilling what I set out to do, making the corrections that were needed early on, is something that I'm extremely proud of. And it took a lot of work. And it wasn't just Sheriff Doug Schuster. We put the right people in the right places, tremendous support from my staff. That is everything. They represent me. When they interact with people in the public, if it's a good interaction, that helps us grow as an agency. So we really have turned the corner. We're doing more than we've ever done. Fixing compression, fixing the pay, that was a starting point. Now we're moving forward, adding staffing. That's a great thing. We've built up our relationships with the allied agencies to the point where they're endorsing the sheriff. So I think everything that I set out to do, we've accomplished. In fact, in 3.5 years, having worked here 30, I would honestly say we've accomplished more in 3.5 short years than we've seen over 30 years. Remember, back in 1991, we had 6 more deputies on the street than when I took office. The population doubled in that time. Calls for service tripled. Well, you still have to have staff to be able to handle these calls. We became very ineffective. We aren't just handling calls anymore. We're running from call to call. Well, how do you investigate during that time? So by adding more staff, you spread those calls out. We're doing great investigations. I think what I'm most proud of, honestly, crime rate in Mohave County under my tenure continues to drop. Burglaries are down close to 30%. Thefts are down 13%. This tells me what we're doing is effective. And the reason it's effective is we now have time to actively investigate these crimes. It used to be, hey, I had my bicycle stolen. And the officer would go out and he had no time. And he'd write down the information and say, call your insurance. Well, now, not only are we taking a good report and doing a solid investigation, we're recovering the bicycle, we're finding the bad guy, and then we're going one step further. We're writing warrants into this person's house, and we're solving 12 or 14 other burglaries. That's how we're getting it done. That's what I enjoy doing, and we're going to continue to hit it hard. As far as what I haven't accomplished, there's a lot of things I haven't accomplished. One thing we desperately need, I'm going to continue to work on, is substations. We have a substation in Lake Havasu and Mohave Valley that are deplorable, literally falling down. They're 40, 50 years old. They need replacement. Ironically, they were on the county replacement list in 2005. Here we are 15 years later, and somehow it fell off that list. So the board is aware of that need. But again, I'm very single-minded. You can't have it all at once. What is the top priority? We accomplished that. Let's keep moving forward. So I think over the next 4 years in office, when we have this talk again 3.5 years from now, we're going to say, hey, this is your additional accomplishments, and it's going to be pretty impressive.
Great. All that's left is closing thoughts.
Oh.
I'm going to give you a couple minutes if you want to talk to the voters out
Sure.
there and tell them your thoughts.
Great. Well, Mohave County, I can tell you as your sheriff, I'm proud to serve. I can tell you that we have worked very hard on your behalf. We believe in you, and I want to thank you for believing in us. The support that we receive here in Mohave County and the backing of law enforcement, not just the sheriff's office, but all our law enforcement officers, means more than you know. We see everything happening around this country. It's demoralizing, and I can say without hesitation that Mohave County is stellar when it comes to backing the men and women that wear that badge. I'm concerned. I've always been concerned. My time's going to come and go. Who is going to want to do this job 5, 10 years down the road based on what's happening? Well, I can tell you in Mohave County, we're going to be okay. We're going to continue to bring in good officers because the people stand behind them. As far as the August 4th elections coming up very quick, I can't wait for it to get here. It's been a long year, not only at the sheriff's office, but trying to campaign. And I just ask for your continued support. We're going to stay the charge. We're going to continue to move forward and make positive changes. And your support will allow me to do so. So please vote for your sheriff, Doug Schuster, at the August 4th primary. If you have a mail-in ballot, click off my name, send it in, and we'll move forward. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sheriff.